breaking news from the edge of our solar system. 3. I divided by Atlas is no longer behaving like a comet at all. In September of 2025, astronomers around the world stared at their monitors in disbelief as the light curve of this alien visitor began to climb off the charts. Numbers that should have remained steady suddenly jumped. Magnitudes that should have dropped gently instead plunged dramatically, turning a faint smudge into something 6 times brighter than predictions allowed. To the untrained eye, it was just another moving dot among countless stars, but to those who understand the language of magnitudes and flux, it was a scream, a signal that something extraordinary was happening. And it was happening far too soon. At 2 astronomical units from the Sun, twice the distance of Earth's orbit, no comet should have been this active, yet Atlas was already roaring awake, as if it had been waiting eons for the right spark. The cause, at least on paper, seemed simple enough. Exotic ices buried within its core, frozen solid since the birth of another star system, suddenly exposed to the unfamiliar heat of our Sunday. But that explanation cracked under scrutiny. The coma surrounding the tiny nucleus of Atlas, a solid lump no more than a few kilometers across, ballooned into a ghostly sphere nearly 700,000 kilometers wide, a swollen shroud large enough to swallow Mercury's orbit, half the size of the Sun itself. No local comet had ever displayed such scale, not at that distance, not at that speed. And Atlas was moving fast, far faster than any native wanderer of our solar neighborhood. At over 210,000 kilometers per hour, it was a bullet from another galaxy's gun, an object on a hyperbolic trajectory that guaranteed it would never return. Then came the color shift. In mid-September, as telescopes tracked its swelling halo, images began to reveal a strange emerald tint. The glow of diatomic carbon, C2, fluorescing under ultraviolet light, should not have been visible yet, not with so little evidence of carbon-bearing compounds in earlier spectra. And yet there it was, vivid and undeniable, turning Atlas into a green beacon in the darkness. It was as if the comet were lighting up deliberately, revealing itself in a hue humans instinctively read as alien, unnatural, a color too sharp for coincidence. Amateur photographers captured the eerie glow during a lunar eclipse, their images spreading across forums and feeds, sparking debates that swung wildly between sober chemistry and fevered speculation. But brightness and color were not the only rules Atlas seemed determined to break. Its tail pointed in the wrong direction. Instead of streaming away from the Sun under the pressure of solar wind, a plume of dust and debris appeared to defy physics itself, angling sunward in what astronomers call an anti-tail. Hubble caught it in July, Gemini confirmed it in August, and still the anomaly persisted. Projection effects, some said. Unusually large dust grains, said others. But in private, even the most cautious voices admitted the truth. The geometry was too clean, too stable, too precise. Something about Atlas seemed to prefer impossible alignments. And as the mystery deepened, the silence began. For weeks, the flagship observatories of the world, Hubble, James Webb, Gemini, released no new public images. Official channels that had eagerly shared early snapshots of Atlas went dark, just as the comet's behavior grew strangest. Amateurs filled the gap with shaky photographs, but the high-resolution eyes of humanity's best instruments stayed quiet. The timing was suspicious, too neat to ignore. When the data mattered most, the data vanished. What we do know is this: Atlas is closing in on a rendezvous that will push every telescope, every spacecraft, and every theory to the limit. On October 3rd, it sweeps past Mars at a distance of just 30 million kilometers, close enough for the orbiters circling the red planet to glimpse. Details Earthbound observers will miss. And by the end of the month, on October 29th and 30th, it dives to perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, racing at nearly 70 kilometers per second, moving twice as fast as Earth in its orbit. But from our vantage point on Earth, we may see almost nothing. In October, Atlas slips into the Sun's glare, vanishing into superior conjunction just as it becomes most violent, most alive, most likely to reveal whether it is natural or not. It will be hidden when its secrets are laid bare. The timing alone would be enough to drive speculation. But 2025 is not a normal year. Even as Atlas makes its singular flyby, 7 native comets of our own system are crowding into the inner solar system, an impossible statistical swarm. And in this chorus of icy wanderers, Atlas is the soloist, louder, brighter, stranger than the rest. Coincidence, perhaps? Or maybe the universe has just delivered a message in a bottle, an object that refuses to behave because it was never meant to. For now, the facts are undeniable. Atlas is interstellar, Atlas is breaking every rule, and Atlas has chosen the strangest possible moment to pass through our skies. And as we count down to its October encounter, one question echoes louder than all others. What happens when alien chemistry, frozen in silence for billions of years, finally awakens under our sun? When a comet wakes up, it breathes. That is the poetry astronomers sometimes use to describe sublimation, the process where frozen gases locked inside a nucleus erupt into space as the sun's heat touches them for the first time. But what 3I divided by Atlas is doing in 2025 is more than breathing. It is screaming, roaring, inflating an atmosphere so vast it beggars belief. By mid-September, telescopes from Hawaii to Chile confirmed the coma had ballooned to nearly 700,000 kilometers across, a shroud half the diameter of the sun, wrapped around a core no larger than Manhattan. Imagine a speck of ice, the size of Central Park, cloaking itself in a ghostly bubble wide enough to swallow planets. That is the scale of the absurdity. Normally, carbon dioxide plays second fiddle in cometary chemistry, a minor volatile compared to the water vapor that dominates the tails of local comets. But in Atlas, the roles are reversed. Spectra from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed a composition drenched in CO2, while water barely registered. That inversion alone marks Atlas as an outsider, born in a nursery where temperatures and pressures sculpted matter into unfamiliar recipes. What we are seeing now may be chemistry from a star system dozens or hundreds of light years away, preserved like a time capsule until our sun's photons cracked it open. Each molecule venting into space is a whisper from another origin, and for the first time in history we are listening. The sheer violence of Atlas's coma has caught observers off guard. Dust grains, larger than sand, are riding the geysers outward, scattering sunlight in patterns that shouldn't exist, patterns that even casual observers can detect in the faint geometry of its glow. Instead of the clean, elegant tales painted across textbooks, Atlas shows jets, fans, and a disorienting plume that seems to reach toward the sun rather than away. Hubble captured it in late July, Gemini South confirmed it in August, and still it persists. An anti-tale, an insult to physics, a middle finger to every rule solar radiation should enforce. Theories scramble to catch up. Maybe the grains are simply too heavy to be pushed by photons. Maybe perspective tricks us, Earth staring from the wrong angle. But each image reinforces the suspicion that this is no ordinary plume. It is stable, sharp, almost engineered. And then there is the heat. Instruments tuned to the infrared spectrum detect temperatures in the coma far above what sunlight alone should provide. Something else is feeding energy into the gas, reactions deep within ices that have lain dormant since before our ancestors stood upright. Some astronomers whisper about trapped clathrates, exotic ice lattices that collapse explosively when warmed. Others wonder whether more complex chemistry is unfolding, carbon compounds breaking, recombining, igniting like fireworks on a molecular scale. Whatever the cause, Atlas is running hot, and the heat is driving its transformation at a pace models cannot match. From Earth, the sight is unsettling. Photographs show not a delicate wanderer, but a monster haloed in sickly green, sprouting tails that point in contradictory directions. To the naked eye, it remains invisible, buried in glare, but cameras know better, and the images they capture look almost alive, as though Atlas were not merely reacting to physics but choosing how to display itself. This is how conspiracy theories are born, not from fantasy but from data that bends too far, from graphs and spectra that leave even sober scientists hesitating before they speak. And yet, for all its drama, Atlas remains indifferent. It races on its hyperbolic path, gaining speed, approaching the moment when solar heat will hammer it hardest. The fear among professionals is simple, that the greatest changes, the real revelations, will unfold while Earth is blinded by the Sunday. Superior conjunction begins in early October, just as Atlas's coma reaches its most volatile stage. Ground-based telescopes will be useless, satellites too vulnerable to risk pointing near the solar disk. We will be blind at the very moment Atlas bears its secrets. Unless the orbiters circling Mars, positioned by cosmic luck at the perfect vantage point, transmit their data faithfully, humanity may miss the climax of the most important comet encounter in history. There is a darker irony in this timing. When a comet's coma grows this vast, it often signals instability. Many have fragmented under such stress, shedding pieces that scatter like shrapnel into the void. Atlas could flare brilliantly, then collapse into fading embers, its story ending before it is fully told. Or it could survive, mutated, reshaped, carrying the scars of its outburst as it swings past the Sunday. Either way, the truth is clear. We are witnessing processes never before seen in an interstellar visitor. Oumuamua stayed silent. Borisov played by the rules, but Atlas is staging a spectacle so outrageous it feels intentional. And perhaps that is why whispers of artificiality grow louder. In labs and late-night conference calls, serious scientists now ask questions once reserved for pulp novels. Could an object born elsewhere carry design, not chance? Could an interstellar fragment be more than geology? No one has proof, but the possibility lingers, fed by each photograph of that impossible anti-tail, each spectrum showing alien chemistry, each measurement of heat that refuses to add up. What is undeniable is that Atlas is unlike anything we have ever seen. Its coma is too large, its chemistry too strange, its behavior too deliberate. As October looms, the world waits, half in awe, half in dread, for the moment when the sun will squeeze the truth from this visitor. And if the coma is already this vast, this violent, this incomprehensible, what comes next may not just challenge our models, it may challenge our imagination. No one expected the color. Comets can shine in many ways: icy blues, smoky grays, the pure white glare of sunlight scattered by dust. But in mid-September of 2025, 3. I divided by Atlas betrayed a transformation that startled even the most cynical observers. Telescopes aimed southward suddenly captured not just a brighter halo but a glow tinged unmistakably green, an emerald radiance spreading across the swollen coma like some alien lantern. To the naked eye, it was still too faint to pierce the twilight skies, but on sensitive CCD cameras the change was dramatic, undeniable, and unsettling. Atlas wasn't just misbehaving anymore, it was advertising itself. At first, the scientific explanation was straightforward. Diatomic carbon, C2, fluoresces when bombarded with ultraviolet light from the sun, releasing photons at a wavelength of about 516 nanometers, the exact shade of green now flooding Atlas's coma. The mechanism is known, documented, even expected in many comets closer to the Sunday. But Atlas had not revealed significant carbon signatures in its earlier spectra. Its gas should have been dominated by carbon dioxide, not free carbon molecules ready to glow. The numbers didn't match the images, and when data and images diverge, suspicion creeps in. Around the world, amateur astronomers posted side-by-side comparisons. August, a pale smudge. September, a green beacon. The change was too abrupt, too theatrical. Forums lit up with speculation. Was Atlas harboring a reservoir of exotic carbon compounds buried deep within its nucleus, suddenly unleashed by heat? Was there a new chemistry at play, reactions that don't occur in native comets, processes only possible in ices forged under alien suns? Or was something else, something less natural, responsible for the switch? The timing amplified the unease. The emerald glow peaked during a lunar eclipse on September 14th, when the moon's shadow provided darker skies for observation. As Americans gathered to watch the blood-red moon, cameras also captured the faint shimmer of Atlas glowing green, like a ghost haunting the heavens. Within hours, social media swelled with images of a tiny jade dot framed against the eclipse, headlines blaring, "The green comet from another star." For millions, it was their first glimpse of Atlas, and first impressions matter. It looked alien. Scientists tried to steady the narrative. Press releases framed the glow as normal, reassuring the public that comets often display green coloration near perihelion. But in private, the conversations were less confident. Spectrographs showed inconsistency, carbon levels too low to justify the intensity of the glow, localized patches where the green flared brighter than elsewhere, variations that suggested structured jets rather than uniform chemistry. To some, it looked less like a natural haze and more like signals, bursts, intentional or not, woven into the coma itself. The uncertainty leaked. A researcher at an Arizona observatory, unable to contain his excitement, posted on an internal listserv that the patterning in Atlas's coma could represent periodic modulation, almost like a code. Within days, the email was circulating online, ripped from context, cited as proof that the government was covering up extraterrestrial communication. The claim wasn't evidence, but in an atmosphere already thick with mistrust, it spread like wildfire. Podcasts turned it into gospel, talk radio inflated it, and YouTube algorithms feasted. The comet wasn't just green, it was sending a message. Meanwhile, professionals scrambled to gather more data, but every night mattered less as Atlas slid closer to the sun, its elongation shrinking, its visibility compromised by glare. Spectroscopic windows narrowed, weather interfered. Clouds rolled across observatories just as key moments arrived. The frustration was palpable. This was a once-in-history object, the third interstellar visitor ever recorded, glowing like an alien beacon, and Earth's best instruments were being robbed of their chance to study it. The cruel geometry of orbital mechanics was conspiring with bad luck to blind us at the very moment the story turned strange. And still, the coma pulsed. Observers reported that the green wasn't steady. It fluctuated, waxing and waning on timescales of hours. Some blamed inconsistent calibration. Others insisted the changes were real, that jets of gas were bursting from the nucleus in rhythmic spasms, releasing fresh carbon molecules that briefly flared before dispersing. On stacked time-lapse images, the coma seemed to shimmer, almost like a heartbeat. And once the word heartbeat entered the conversation, the metaphor stuck. Atlas wasn't just a rock, it was alive. For ordinary Americans, that was the hook. The media latched onto the story with predictable fervor. CNN ran segments titled, "The Beating Heart of an Alien Visitor." Fox News countered with darker speculation. Are we witnessing a probe? Late-night comedians joked about Martians sending green party invitations. TikTok exploded with edits overlaying Atlas images with synthwave music and captions like first contact vibes. The public didn't care about carbon spectra or ultraviolet fluorescence. They cared that a visitor from another star had turned green, and green meant alien. In Washington, officials bristled. The White House science advisor gave a carefully worded briefing, stressing that no evidence supported claims of intelligence. NASA released a Q&A document insisting that the color was entirely natural and consistent with known cometary behavior. But the timing was disastrous. These reassurances landed just as Hubble and Webb stopped releasing images of Atlas, citing operational constraints. To the skeptical eye, it looked like silence at the exact wrong moment. The conspiracy narrative practically wrote itself. The comet had started speaking, and the government had cut the feed. Inside the scientific community, the divide sharpened. Some argued that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and there was none just pixels misinterpreted by overeager minds. Others pointed out that extraordinary evidence doesn't always arrive neatly packaged. Oumuamua's acceleration in 2017 had defied explanation, yet no one had nailed down the mechanism. Borisov had confounded chemical models. Why should Atlas not continue the tradition of anomalies, stretching the boundaries of what we thought possible? Why should we assume this glow is simple? The questions deepened as data trickled in from spectrographs. There were hints of complex organics hydrocarbons breaking apart under sunlight, producing not only carbon but traces of other molecules never clearly seen in local comets. Some of these emissions clustered around wavelengths not easily explained by known transitions. To cautious voices, this was noise. To bold ones, it was a whisper from another chemistry set, a molecular signature of life's building blocks forged under alien skies. The truth hovered between, elusive, tantalizing, infuriating, and the clock kept ticking. October was coming, and with it perihelion. Atlas was racing toward the sun, accelerating to speeds no human machine could match, dragging its green shroud with it, flaring brighter, hotter, stranger. The heartbeat shimmer continued, pulsing through stacked frames like coded signals across the void. Was it random? Was it the chaotic breath of sublimating ice? Or was it something more deliberate? Scientists couldn't say. The data was too thin, the time too short, the angles too cruel. But the public had already chosen their narrative. Atlas wasn't a comet anymore. It was a visitor. The final days of September saw the frenzy peak. Skywatchers stayed up all night, scouring the heavens for any glimpse of the green glow. Forums filled with shaky photos, every pixel scrutinized for hidden meaning. News anchors spoke of an emerald omen, blending science with myth, and in the back rooms of observatories, exhausted astronomers stared at their screens, wondering if they were glimpsing not just alien chemistry, but alien intention. Because deep down, the unease was impossible to dismiss. Diatomic carbon alone couldn't explain it. Fluorescence alone couldn't explain it. The glow was too bright, too uneven, too perfectly timed to feel like chance. Something about Atlas's emerald transformation suggested performance, as though this object, born around another star, understood it was being watched. And if that were true, if even part of it were true, then humanity's place in the universe had already shifted, quietly, irrevocably, under the green light of a comet that refused to behave. By the end of September 2025, the green glow was no longer the only spectacle. A new anomaly emerged, one that sliced straight through the foundations of comet physics. Atlas had grown a tail that pointed in the wrong direction. Every child who has seen a picture book of the solar system knows the rule: comet tails always point away from the sunday. It isn't superstition, it's the mechanics of radiation, pressure, and solar wind. Photons stream outward from the sun, tiny particles of light pushing dust and gas away, sculpting long, elegant plumes that stretch for millions of miles into darkness. The rule is so ironclad that astronomers use tail direction as a compass. Where the tail points, the sun must be behind. But Atlas broke the compass. Images from Hubble, Gemini South, and countless ground-based telescopes began to show something uncanny. A plume of material leaning sunward, almost like the comet was dragging a streamer against the cosmic wind. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't fleeting. It was sharp, deliberate, persistent. The textbooks called it an anti-tail, but in private, many scientists admitted the label was little more than an excuse, a word to cover a mystery. Explanations multiplied. Some insisted it was an optical illusion, a trick of perspective as Earth's vantage point crossed the comet's orbital plane. Dust grains too heavy to be blown by photons might hang back, forming what appeared to be a sunward streak. But the geometry was unkind to such rationalizations. The anti-tail wasn't faint or occasional, it was vivid, stable, and growing. To the naked eye, Atlas was still invisible, but through the sensitive optics of observatories, the impossible was being documented night after night. The debate spilled quickly beyond academia. Within days, the sunward tail had become the centerpiece of talk shows and podcasts. Some hosts dismissed it as a quirk of physics, but others leaned into the unease. If Atlas could defy the sun, what else might it defy? Was this not evidence of propulsion, of steering, of intention? 1,000 conspiracy threads bloomed across Reddit and Twitter, diagrams sketching Atlas as a disguised probe shedding exhaust in controlled bursts. The green glow became a signal, the anti-tail became a thruster, the comet became a ship. NASA fought back with calm infographics. They explained that large dust particles, ejected at the right angle, could linger in a way that made them appear to point sunward when projected onto the sky. They showed examples from past comets, faint anti-tails photographed decades earlier, reminders that Atlas was not the first to play such tricks. But even their tone betrayed discomfort. Past anti-tails had been brief, pale, almost apologetic. Atlas's plume was bold, theatrical, impossible to ignore. The public heard the explanations but smelled hesitation. And in America, hesitation feeds suspicion. The spectacle grew worse as Atlas accelerated. Night after night, the anti-tail sharpened, a ghostly spike, aimed like a spear at the heart of the Sunday. Photographs went viral, some amateur shots even showing the bizarre geometry without the need for long exposures. The comet that points backward became a headline across major outlets. Late-night comedians joked about cosmic middle fingers, while more serious commentators wondered aloud whether humanity was being shown something deliberately uncanny. A visitor that breaks the most basic law of cometary behavior sends a message no scientist can fully sanitize. Inside observatories, the frustration was palpable. Teams ran simulations, trying to reproduce Atlas's plume with models of dust-size distributions and ejection velocities. Some fits worked for a night or two, then failed as the anti-tail persisted longer than expected. One group in Arizona suggested Atlas was spinning slowly, creating thermal contrasts between its day and night sides that funneled material in peculiar directions. Others proposed the nucleus might be fractured, releasing jets from multiple vents, some angled sunward. But none of the models captured the stability, the eerie precision, the sense of design baked into the images. Meanwhile, the public imagination raced ahead. YouTube exploded with animations portraying Atlas as an engine-driven craft, its anti-tail depicted as glowing exhaust. Influencers branded it the alien brake light. Talk radio callers warned that Earth was being targeted. Past anomalies like Oumuamua's unexplained acceleration were dragged back into the spotlight, folded into a growing narrative that humanity was no longer watching random space debris. We were being visited, tested, perhaps even surveyed. Politicians began to weigh in. A senator from Texas demanded a classified briefing on Atlas, citing concerns about national security. A congresswoman from California urged NASA to live-stream all available images, warning that secrecy was fueling panic. The Pentagon, already sensitive from past UFO disclosures, issued a terse statement. Atlas poses no threat to Earth. The choice of words only fanned the flames. Threat was not the question. The question was identity. And still, Atlas remained silent except for its display. It raced toward the sun, its coma swelling, its glow green, its plume pointed stubbornly against the solar wind. Observers spoke of it like a living thing, a creature straining against invisible currents, refusing to conform, flaunting its strangeness before vanishing forever. For scientists, it was an exasperating puzzle. For the public, it was a revelation. By early October, the anti-tail had become a permanent feature of Atlas's profile. No matter the telescope, no matter the filter, the same geometry appeared. One tail away, one tail toward, like an X written across the stars. As if the comet wanted to remind us, again and again, that rules can be broken, that the universe is bigger, stranger, more alive than we dared imagine. And as the countdown to perihelion drew closer, the suspicion hardened into conviction. Atlas was not just a comet, it was a riddle, and its backward-pointing tail was a deliberate clue. The problem was simple. We had no way to solve it. By the time Atlas reached perihelion at the end of October, it would slip behind the sun from Earth's perspective. Our telescopes would be blinded, our eyes closed at the very climax of the mystery. Unless the spacecraft orbiting Mars captured and transmitted the truth, humanity might never know whether the anti-tail was physics misbehaving or a message written in dust. The comet would speak, and we would not hear. And so, as September bled into October, the world looked skyward, with a mix of awe and dread. The green glow still shimmered, the coma still expanded, and the tail still defied the Sunday. In observatories, in government halls, in living rooms across America, the question lingered unspoken but unavoidable. If Atlas can point its tail wherever it pleases, who or what is holding the rudder? October arrived with a sky more crowded than any astronomer alive had ever witnessed. In an ordinary year, if you were lucky, one comet might stumble into binocular range, a faint blur requiring patience and dark skies. Most years offered nothing at all, just dim smudges catalogued by professionals, their discoveries tucked into databases, unnoticed by the public. But 2025 shattered that pattern with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. 7 comets, each large enough and bright enough to merit headlines, all converged within weeks of each other, forming what observers quickly nicknamed the Swarm. Pan-stars, Swan, Stereo, Atlas K1, Atlas G3, Lemon, Neat, 7 names. 7 icy bodies flaring into activity at once, like actors stepping onto a stage they hadn't rehearsed for but somehow knew to enter, together. From Earth's perspective, they rose one after another in the same season, their tails stretching like searchlights across the heavens. Time-lapse photographs captured multiple streaks in a single frame, threads of light weaving into a choreography that seemed impossible to deny. It was as though the solar system itself had decided to host a parade, and Atlas, glowing green and misbehaving, was marching at its head. Astronomers tried to calm the storm. They explained that comets originate from the Oort cloud, a vast spherical shell of icy bodies surrounding the Sunday. Perturbations, nudges from passing stars, galactic tides, or even the gravitational pull of Jupiter can set clusters of comets tumbling inward. Coincidences happen. Randomness produces patterns, but even as they spoke, their voices carried unease. Clustering on this scale had never been recorded. 7 notable comets in one season was not just unusual, it was historic. And when you set that historic coincidence beside the third confirmed interstellar visitor in human history, arriving at the exact same time, the odds collapsed into something that defied casual dismissal. To scientists, it was a statistical anomaly. To the public, it was orchestration. Social media feasted. 7 messengers, one viral thread declared, arriving with the Green Herald from another star. Conspiracy channels spun stories of alien civilizations timing their probes with comet swarms, camouflaging artificial craft among natural debris. Evangelical preachers thundered that the swarm was a sign of revelation, a celestial army riding into view. Meanwhile, science communicators posted charts showing that randomness can cluster, that improbable events must happen eventually. But charts rarely win hearts. Images do. And the images, 7 tails, 1 sky, looked like a signal. At observatories, professionals struggled with the psychology. Human brains are pattern machines, evolved to detect order even when none exists. Clustering always feels meaningful, yet some clusters are meaningful. Was this one of them? The debate grew heated. Some insisted that invoking coordination without evidence was pseudoscience. Others pointed to subtle timing correlations, orbital alignments that strained the bounds of chance. If the comets were independent, why did so many brighten within days of each other? Why did their trajectories, while diverse, converge toward visibility in the same season? Why now? Atlas loomed over every discussion. Unlike the 7 natives, it was an outsider, a hyperbolic traveler guaranteed never to return. Its presence alongside the swarm was what transformed coincidence into riddle. If Atlas had arrived in 2024 or 2026, the swarm would still have been remarkable, but explainable. If the swarm had occurred without Atlas, it would still have been bizarre, but local. Together, they became something else entirely, a convergence that felt scripted. News anchors leaned into the drama. The Year of Comets, they called it. Time magazine splashed an illustration of Atlas leading a squadron of 7 icy companions across its October cover, the headline asking, "Coincidence or contact?" Talk shows brought astronomers and ufologists onto the same panels, voices clashing, ratings soaring. Even ordinary Americans who rarely looked up now found themselves standing in backyards, scanning the skies, wondering if those streaks of light meant more than frozen rock. For scientists on the ground, the swarm was a double-edged gift. More comets meant more data, more opportunities to study outgassing and tail formation under varying conditions. But it also meant dilution, distraction, and suspicion. Every anomaly in a tail's twist, every burst of brightness, every fragmentation event was seized upon as further proof that something or someone was choreographing the show. And the fact that solar maximum was underway, the sun at peak activity, only muddied the picture. Solar storms could exaggerate comet tails, making ordinary bodies appear spectacular. But for the public, solar cycles were abstractions. What they saw was 7 glowing streaks arriving with a green comet from another star. In Washington, the swarm turned into politics. Briefings multiplied. NASA urged Congress for more funding to track interstellar objects, pointing out how little warning Atlas had given. Intelligence agencies quietly assessed whether foreign adversaries might exploit the spectacle with disinformation campaigns. The Pentagon fielded questions about planetary defense, even though no comet posed any threat of impact. For once, Democrats and Republicans agreed on something. The public was rattled, and transparency was thin. By mid-October, the swarm was unavoidable. Amateur photographs flooded social feeds, showing multiple comets in the same wide-field shots. Some appeared brighter than predictions, others dimmer, but together they gave the night sky a texture of strangeness unseen in living memory. For many Americans, it was the first time the universe felt active, almost crowded, like a stage preparing for a performance, and the performance had a lead. Atlas, still green, still swelling, still pointing its impossible tail toward the sun, became the face of the phenomenon. The swarm were its chorus. What did it mean? Astronomers urged patience, data, rigor. But patience is a fragile currency. The public wanted answers now, and so speculation metastasized. Blogs described gravitational shepherds lurking in the outer system, rogue planets pulling comets inward. Others whispered of electromagnetic beacons, alien engineering on a scale beyond comprehension, tuning the orchestra of ice. Skeptics shook their heads, pointing to statistical inevitability. But inevitability is cold comfort when the sky itself seems to pulse with intention. For all the noise, one truth stood clear. Never before had humanity witnessed a convergence like this. 7 comets from within, 1 from beyond, all gathered in the same season, the same sky, the same fragile moment of history. And while scientists clung to probability, ordinary people stared upward and saw pattern, purpose, message. As October deepened and Atlas neared perihelion, the swarm thickened the tension. Were these comets random drifters stirred by galactic tides, or had something nudged them here, a hidden hand writing across the firmament? For now, no one could say. But the timing gnawed at the imagination. It was too neat, too uncanny, too perfect. Atlas was not alone, and maybe, just maybe, that was the point. As the swarm of 2025 blazed across the sky and Atlas swelled into its emerald monstrosity, a question began to whisper louder than all others. What if none of this was coincidence? What if something unseen, something vast, was pulling the strings? Scientists hate words like fate, destiny, orchestration, but the sheer improbability of 8 comets, 7 born under our sun and 1 forged under another, arriving at the same stage in the same season, forced even the most hardened skeptics to consider the unthinkable. Could there be an invisible hand at work? The first explanation always returned to gravity. It is the oldest actor in the cosmic play, the force that sculpts galaxies and bends the paths of light itself. Perhaps a rogue planet beyond Neptune, long hypothesized but never observed, had stirred the Oort cloud into chaos, sending a batch of comets sunward all at once. Planet 9, the phantom giant, resurrected in a moment of spectacle. The math almost fit. Perturbations across millions of years could funnel icy wanderers into similar timelines. Yet the orbits of the swarm betrayed no such shepherd. Their inclinations, eccentricities, and nodes were scattered, diverse, stubbornly independent. No single gravitational architect had left fingerprints. If gravity was the culprit, it was a clumsy hand indeed. Electromagnetism offered another door. Comets carry ionized gases, and the sun's magnetic field can twist their tails, sometimes violently. But fields that could corral 7 comets, plus an interstellar outsider, would need to dwarf anything our star has ever displayed. Black holes and neutron stars wield such power. Not a middle-aged yellow Sunday solar maximum might explain the spectacle of bright, flickering tails, but not the improbable timing of so many arrivals. Electromagnetism, like gravity, faltered under the weight of coincidence. Still, the suspicion grew. Too many anomalies had stacked up. Atlas glowing green long before chemistry allowed. Atlas pointing its tail toward the sun. Atlas's coma swelling to planetary scales. Atlas arriving in the middle of a historic swarm. Coincidences pile like kindling, and eventually a spark of speculation ignites. What if these comets had not wandered inward on their own? What if they had been nudged, guided, chosen? The whispers spread beyond scientific circles. Some theorists imagined a gravitational wave sweeping through the outer system, invisible but powerful, herding objects like leaves caught in a tide. Others conjured the presence of a vast structure, hidden in the darkness beyond Pluto, a relic of alien engineering subtly adjusting trajectories. A Dyson shepherd, a cosmic net. Madness, perhaps, but no more mad than the data itself appeared. Conspiracy culture, already primed by years of UFO disclosures and Pentagon admissions, pounced. Podcasts declared the swarm a probe convoy. YouTube videos animated Atlas as a green flagship, leading a squadron of icy scouts disguised as natural comets. Talk radio hosts warned that humanity was being surveyed, tested, catalogued. Evangelical voices thundered about the 7 trumpets, each comet a herald of judgment. The stories diverged wildly, but they all shared a single seed, the suspicion that chance alone could not explain what the skies were showing. Meanwhile, within observatories, scientists wrestled with quieter demons. They knew the danger of confirmation bias, of seeing patterns where randomness reigns. They knew clustering can emerge from chance. Flip a coin long enough, and impossible runs appear inevitable. Yet they also knew history. Great breakthroughs often began with anomalies dismissed as noise. Plate tectonics was once a crackpot idea. Pulsars were once LGM, little green men, before neutron stars were understood. To reject the invisible hand outright felt reckless. To embrace it felt unscientific. The line between paranoia and vision blurred, and so the theories multiplied. Could galactic tides, the gravitational pull of the Milky Way itself, be sweeping the Oort cloud at this very moment? Could subtle resonances, invisible harmonics between planets, have synchronized cometary paths across eons until they collided in 2025? Could Atlas itself, carrying fields or materials unknown, have triggered sympathetic outbursts among its native cousins, like a tuning fork vibrating others into song? Every explanation raised more questions than it answered. If a rogue planet had nudged the swarm, why did no telescope detect it? If galactic tides were responsible, why now, and why in alignment with Atlas? If aliens had engineered the timing, what was the purpose of the display? Mere theater, or preparation for something larger? The media, feeding on mystery, blurred speculation with fact. Headlines screamed, "The cosmic conspiracy," and "The year the sky spoke back." Americans who had never heard of the Oort cloud now debated it in diners. Children in suburban backyards pointed at streaks of light and asked their parents whether aliens were real. Scientists on talk shows tried to temper the fire, but their hesitations sounded like secrets, and in the absence of certainty, imagination filled the void. All the while, Atlas raced closer to the sun, its coma billowing, its green glow pulsing, its backward-pointing tail refusing to fade. If an invisible hand existed, Atlas was its most flamboyant gesture. And as October deepened, the comet began to feel less like a rock and more like a performance, an actor stepping into the spotlight, flanked by a chorus of 7, moving to choreography no one could fully decipher. In the end, whether the invisible hand was gravity, electromagnetism, galactic tides, alien design, or nothing at all, its effect was undeniable. Humanity was transfixed. For the first time in living memory, the night sky belonged not to silence, but to drama. And in that drama, the audience could not shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, had written the script. From the moment Atlas broke its first rule of physics, the word hovered in the background like an unspoken curse: artificial. Scientists avoided it in official reports, journalists flirted with it in headlines, and conspiracy theorists shouted it from every digital rooftop. But by the time October's first week bled into its second, the whisper had grown too loud to ignore. This comet, or whatever it was, looked less like a natural wanderer and more like something constructed, something performing. The precedent was already there. Oumuamua, the first interstellar visitor in 2017, had refused to fit neatly into any category. It accelerated without outgassing, tumbled in a shape no comet should, and left behind more questions than answers. A Harvard astronomer dared to suggest it might be alien technology, and though the mainstream scoffed, the suspicion never died. 2 years later, Borisov appeared, a textbook comet by every measure, soothing nerves, re-establishing the boundaries of the possible. And now came Atlas, the third interstellar object, but neither silent like Oumuamua, nor ordinary like Borisov. It was loud, unruly, impossible to ignore. If the first had been too quiet and the second too normal, the third was too flamboyant. The evidence piled high, a coma larger than physics predicted, a green glow far brighter than its chemistry allowed, a tail pointing toward the Sunday, a light curve leaping like a heartbeat, a timing that placed it at the center of the largest comet swarm in recorded history. Each anomaly could be explained away individually, with enough math and hand-waving. But together, they painted a picture that felt less like randomness and more like choreography. Scientists argued bitterly over the possibilities. Some clung to natural explanations, stacking models of sublimating carbon dioxide, unusual dust grains, and optical illusions. Others allowed their imaginations to stretch, whispering in conference calls about probes, signals, constructs built of ice and dust to mask their true purpose. The word artificial entered papers as a hypothetical, a straw man to be dismantled, but its mere presence gave it legitimacy. Once spoken, it could not be unsaid. The public had no such restraint. On social media, Atlas was declared an alien ship, a messenger, even a harbinger of apocalypse. Memes proliferated, painting it as a glowing emerald eye staring at Earth, or a spear hurled by some cosmic hand. News anchors invited ufologists to panels alongside sober astronomers, framing debates as clashes between open-minded visionaries and closed-minded skeptics. Ratings soared. Podcasts branded the comet the third witness, tying it to narratives of disclosure and cover-up that had simmered since the Pentagon released UFO footage in 2020. To millions of Americans, the idea that Atlas might be artificial wasn't just plausible, it was thrilling. The government walked a tightrope. NASA continued to insist that all observations fell within the range of natural variation, even as its own telescopes went silent at critical moments. The Pentagon dismissed any threat, but quietly requested classified briefings on Atlas's trajectory and behavior. Leaks hinted at internal divisions. Some officials saw a chance to ignite public wonder, others feared panic. Silence, once meant to calm, now looked like concealment. Meanwhile, new data trickled in, and each fragment seemed to sharpen the blade of suspicion. Infrared readings hinted at structural regularity within the coma, as though jets of gas were firing from fixed points rather than random vents. Radar pings from experimental ground arrays returned echoes too sharp for an object supposedly cloaked in diffuse dust. And then came the strangest of all. Fluctuations in the green glow that repeated at intervals suspiciously close to prime numbers. Was it noise? Was it chance? Or was it deliberate modulation? Even cautious scientists admitted the resemblance was eerie. For those predisposed to believe, the conclusion was obvious. Atlas wasn't just misbehaving, it was speaking. Every pulse of green light, every twist of its anti-tail, every surge in brightness was interpreted as communication. Some claimed to decode patterns, assembling crude alphabets from the timing of flares. Others insisted the message wasn't meant for Earth at all, but for something else. Some unseen audience watching from beyond. Theories spiraled, evidence bent to fit imagination, but the whisper grew louder. Artificial, artificial, artificial. And yet, doubt lingered. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and proof remained elusive. The data was messy, the observations compromised by glare, the instruments hampered by timing. Every anomaly could still, in theory, be explained by nature's caprice. Dust grains behave strangely, ice sublimates unpredictably, coincidences happen. Scientists repeated these mantras like prayers, but even they sounded unconvinced. Inside America's cultural psyche, the tension resonated like a drumbeat. This was the land of Roswell and Area 51, the country that had grown up on the X-Files and Independence Day. Belief in the extraordinary was part of the national DNA. Atlas's whisper of artificiality struck chords deeper than science. Fear, hope, dread, wonder. Churches filled with sermons framing the comet as a divine sign. Entrepreneurs rushed to patent Atlas-themed products, from green energy drinks to alien NFTs. Politicians slipped references into speeches, balancing ridicule with intrigue. For weeks, Atlas dominated the American imagination like no celestial visitor since Halley's Comet. And still, the comet itself offered no answers. It raced toward the sun, shedding ice, swelling its coma, flashing its green beacon, pointing its impossible tail backward, a performer in a play no one fully understood. Each night brought fresh images, each image brought fresh anomalies, and each anomaly deepened the suspicion that Atlas was not merely a rock but a riddle. By mid-October, the whisper had become a roar. Artificiality was no longer the fringe theory. It was the question everyone wanted answered. Was Atlas just another comet playing tricks with light and dust? Or was it something more, something built, something sent, something that had crossed the gulf between stars with purpose? The world strained for clarity, but clarity would not come. Not yet. The sun was drawing Atlas into its glare, blinding our telescopes just as the story reached its climax. The truth might be revealed at perihelion, but Earth would be looking away. And perhaps that was the cruelest hint of all. It began quietly, almost too quietly to notice. In early September, as Atlas first began to surge brighter than predictions allowed, the major observatories of the world stopped talking. Hubble's public image releases skipped their usual cadence. James Webb, normally eager to parade its glittering captures across NASA press briefings, offered nothing but generic updates about deep field surveys. Gemini South, which had posted stunning images of Atlas's coma in July and August, fell silent. At first, no one asked why. Busy schedules, weather, operational priorities, these were common excuses. But as September bled into October and Atlas became stranger by the day, the silence turned deafening. Amateur astronomers noticed first. They had tracked every press release, every image dump, every tweet from NASA and ESA accounts. Suddenly, the comet dominating their own backyards was absent from official feeds. Forums filled with questions. Where were the Webb spectra? Where were Hubble's follow-ups? Why were Gemini's archives empty? NASA offered vague answers about telescope pointing constraints, solar safety protocols, and competing priorities. But the timing was too suspicious. The world's most powerful instruments had looked away from the most extraordinary comet in history just as it began breaking every rule. Suspicion metastasized. Social media accused NASA of censorship, claiming the green glow contained signals too obvious to show. Bloggers suggested that Webb's infrared instruments had revealed structural regularity, straight lines, repeating patterns, evidence of machinery masquerading as ice. Some insisted that governments were already in contact, withholding proof until they could control the narrative. Each day, without new images, became fuel for the fire. And as conspiracy theories bloomed, silence hardened into guilt. In America, when authorities refused to speak, people assume they are hiding something. Behind closed doors, the truth was murkier. Observers within the scientific community admitted frustration. Proposals to study Atlas had been submitted months earlier, anticipating an interstellar visitor's arrival. Many were accepted, but suddenly, time allocations shifted. Telescope directors cited safety concerns about pointing too near the sun, or claimed that urgent deep space surveys took precedence. Scientists whispered about quiet directives from above, memos urging restraint. No one could prove it, but the pattern was unmistakable. Atlas had become untouchable. For astronomers on the outside, the silence felt like betrayal. They knew how rare this opportunity was. Oumuamua had been too fast and too faint. Borisov had been too normal. Atlas was the anomaly, the golden ticket, the one that could answer questions lingering for a decade. And yet, the very institutions built to probe cosmic mysteries had pulled the shutters closed. The public's imagination rushed to fill the void. News anchors asked pointed questions. What is NASA not telling us? Talk radio hosts painted images of hidden images locked away in Pentagon vaults. Documentarians drafted scripts titled The Atlas Cover-Up. Even mainstream outlets, wary of conspiracy, acknowledged the oddity. Why no new pictures? In a country conditioned by decades of UFO secrecy and sudden disclosures, the optics were disastrous. The silence wasn't total, of course. Smaller observatories released blurred captures, amateurs posted shaky time lapses, and ground-based surveys logged data. But these were crumbs. The crisp, high-resolution imagery the public had come to expect in the age of Hubble and Webb was missing. Instead, citizens were left with the knowledge that the most advanced eyes humanity had ever built were deliberately closed. Inside universities, young scientists vented openly. Some accused telescope committees of cowardice, bowing to political pressure. Others suspected funding strings, that defense agencies had seized control of Atlas observations for classified purposes. Professors urged caution, reminding students that extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, but their words rang hollow against the glaring absence of data. Science thrives on transparency. Silence was poison. As October deepened, the conspiracy sharpened. A leak, perhaps real, perhaps fabricated, circulated online, allegedly from a Webb technician. It claimed the telescope had indeed captured Atlas in infrared, revealing geometric modulation in its coma, straight ridges in dust jets that looked engineered. NASA dismissed the leak as fabricated nonsense, but the images, blurry and pixelated, spread like wildfire. To the public, they looked exactly like what they feared, evidence of a machine cloaked in ice. Politicians seized the moment. A senator demanded hearings on why taxpayer-funded instruments were withholding images of the most historic comet in history. A congresswoman posted on social media, "The American people deserve to know what Webb is seeing." NASA scrambled to reassure, promising that data would be released at the appropriate time. But in an era of instant communication, delayed transparency reads like a lie. Meanwhile, Atlas itself refused to cooperate with secrecy. The green glow brightened, the anti-tail sharpened, The heartbeat pulses in brightness repeated with unnerving regularity. Amateurs, working with backyard telescopes and crude spectrographs, confirmed what they could. The fluctuations were real. They lacked the precision of Webb or Hubble, but their independence carried weight. If official science would not share, the grassroots would. The gap between the official narrative and the public eye widened until it became a canyon. To scientists, Atlas remained a comet with puzzling anomalies, still explainable with enough creativity. To the public, Atlas had become a cover-up, a visitor disguised, a secret too dangerous to reveal. And the silence of the telescopes was Exhibit A. By mid-October, as Atlas neared Mars and prepared for its plunge toward the Sun, the sense of unease was total. The world's greatest instruments remained mute. Governments issued reassurances that convinced no one. And across America, ordinary citizens stood in backyards, staring upward at a faint blur barely visible, and wondered why the sky's greatest drama was being hidden from them. Perhaps the truth was innocent. Perhaps telescopes had simply been constrained, their safety protocols binding them to caution. Or perhaps the truth was too extraordinary to release, too destabilizing to admit. Either way, the silence was louder than any image, and as Atlas raced toward perihelion, the unanswered question grew heavier. What were the telescopes seeing that we were not allowed to see? It began quietly, almost too quietly to notice. In early September, as Atlas first began to surge brighter than predictions allowed, the major observatories of the world stopped talking. Hubble's public image releases skipped their usual cadence. James Webb, normally eager to parade its glittering captures across NASA press briefings, offered nothing but generic updates about deep field surveys. Gemini South, which had posted stunning images of Atlas's coma in July and August, fell silent. At first, no one asked why. Busy schedules, weather, operational priorities, these were common excuses. But as September bled into October and Atlas became stranger by the day, the silence turned deafening. Amateur astronomers noticed first. They had tracked every press release, every image dump, every tweet from NASA and ESA accounts. Suddenly, the comet dominating their own backyards was absent from official feeds. Forums filled with questions. Where were the Webb spectra? Where were Hubble's follow-ups? Why were Gemini's archives empty? NASA offered vague answers about telescope pointing constraints, solar safety protocols, and competing priorities. But the timing was too suspicious. The world's most powerful instruments had looked away from the most extraordinary comet in history, just as it began breaking every rule. Suspicion metastasized. Social media accused NASA of censorship, claiming the green glow contained signals too obvious to show. Bloggers suggested that Webb's infrared instruments had revealed structural regularity, straight lines, repeating patterns, evidence of machinery masquerading as ice. Some insisted that governments were already in contact, withholding proof until they could control the narrative. Each day without new images became fuel for the fire, and as conspiracy theories bloomed, silence hardened into guilt. In America, when authorities refuse to speak, people assume they are hiding something. Behind closed doors, the truth was murkier. Observers within the scientific community admitted frustration. Proposals to study Atlas had been submitted months earlier, anticipating an interstellar visitor's arrival. Many were accepted, but suddenly, time allocations shifted. Telescope directors cited safety concerns about pointing too near the Sun, or claimed that urgent deep space surveys took precedence. Scientists whispered about quiet directives from above, memos urging restraint. No one could prove it, but the pattern was unmistakable. Atlas had become untouchable. For astronomers on the outside, the silence felt like betrayal. They knew how rare this opportunity was. Oumuamua had been too fast and too faint. Borisov had been too normal. Atlas was the anomaly, the golden ticket, the one that could answer questions lingering for a decade. And yet, the very institutions built to probe cosmic mysteries had pulled the shutters closed. The public's imagination rushed to fill the void. News anchors asked pointed questions. What is NASA not telling us? Talk radio hosts painted images of hidden images locked away in Pentagon vaults. Documentarians drafted scripts titled The Atlas Cover-Up. Even mainstream outlets, wary of conspiracy, acknowledged the oddity. Why no new pictures? In a country conditioned by decades of UFO secrecy and sudden disclosures, the optics were disastrous. The silence wasn't total, of course. Smaller observatories released blurred captures, amateurs posted shaky time-lapses, and ground-based surveys logged data. But these were crumbs. The crisp, high-resolution imagery the public had come to expect in the age of Hubble and Webb was missing. Instead, citizens were left with the knowledge that the most advanced eyes humanity had ever built were deliberately closed. Inside universities, young scientists vented openly. Some accused telescope committees of cowardice, bowing to political pressure. Others suspected funding strings, that defense agencies had seized control of Atlas observations for classified purposes. Professors urged caution, reminding students that extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, but their words rang hollow against the glaring absence of data. Science thrives on transparency. Silence was poison. As October deepened, the conspiracy sharpened. A leak, perhaps real, perhaps fabricated, circulated online, allegedly from a Webb technician. It claimed the telescope had indeed captured Atlas in infrared, revealing geometric modulation in its coma, straight ridges in dust jets that looked engineered. NASA dismissed the leak as fabricated nonsense, but the images, blurry and pixelated, spread like wildfire. To the public, they looked exactly like what they feared, evidence of a machine cloaked in ice. Politicians seized the moment. A senator demanded hearings on why taxpayer-funded instruments were withholding images of the most historic comet in history. A congresswoman posted on social media, "The American people deserve to know what Webb is seeing." NASA scrambled to reassure, promising that data would be released at the appropriate time. But in an era of instant communication, delayed transparency reads like a lie. Meanwhile, Atlas itself refused to cooperate with secrecy. The green glow brightened, the antitail sharpened, the heartbeat pulses in brightness repeated with unnerving regularity. Amateurs, working with backyard telescopes and crude spectrographs, confirmed what they could. The fluctuations were real. They lacked the precision of Webb or Hubble, but their independence carried weight. If official science would not share, the grassroots would. The gap between the official narrative and the public eye widened until it became a canyon. To scientists, Atlas remained a comet with puzzling anomalies, still explainable with enough creativity. To the public, Atlas had become a cover-up, a visitor disguised, a secret too dangerous to reveal. And the silence of the telescopes was Exhibit A. By mid-October, as Atlas neared Mars and prepared for its plunge toward the Sun, the sense of unease was total. The world's greatest instruments remained mute. Governments issued reassurances that convinced no one. And across America, ordinary citizens stood in backyards, staring upward at a faint blur barely visible, and wondered why the sky's greatest drama was being hidden from them. Perhaps the truth was innocent. Perhaps telescopes had simply been constrained, their safety protocols binding them to caution. Or perhaps the truth was too extraordinary to release, too destabilizing to admit. Either way, the silence was louder than any image, and as Atlas raced toward perihelion, the unanswered question grew heavier. What were the telescopes seeing that we were not allowed to see? October 30th, 2025. The day humanity had circled on calendars, whispered about in late-night debates, feared in sermons, and speculated about in podcasts. The day Atlas reached perihelion, plunging past the Sun at nearly 70 kilometers per second, cloaked in a coma the size of a star, glowing emerald green, pulsing with signals that no longer resembled noise. From Earth, we could see nothing. The sun's glare blinded every telescope, every camera. For 24 hours, humanity stood in enforced ignorance, staring at a sky too bright to reveal its greatest secret. But the silence did not extend to space. Mars orbiters, solar probes, even commercial satellites on the edge of the inner system, all continued to record. Their feeds did not reach the public, not directly. Governments intercepted, filtered, debated. Yet leaks always find cracks. By the afternoon of the 30th, fragments of data trickled out. Atlas had not broken apart. It had not faded. It had transformed. Witnesses described its coma collapsing inward, not vanishing but condensing, forming structures within the green haze. Some saw ridges, some saw hexagons, some swore they saw symmetry. The images were blurry, distorted by the sun's interference, but even blurriness could not erase the impression. Atlas was not dissolving like a comet, It was unfolding like a machine. In Washington, emergency meetings ran without pause. The Pentagon argued for action. The word strike entered classified briefings, carried on the breath of generals who feared the worst. Could Atlas be destroyed? Should it be? The answer was grim. At perihelion, Atlas was untouchable, its proximity to the sun making any missile, any warhead, any interception impossible. The earliest opportunity for force would come weeks later, by which time Atlas would already be outbound, past its closest approach, beyond reach. The military option was fantasy. The only option was choice: acknowledge, respond, or remain silent. Inside NASA, scientists pleaded for patience. They begged leaders to resist the language of war. If Atlas was broadcasting, then it was not an attack but a message. The prime numbers, the binary pulses, the synchronized modulation, all hallmarks of communication, not hostility. If you swat at it, one advisor warned, you may be swatting at the first conversation humanity has ever been offered. Others disagreed, or the first ambush. The divide was stark, unbridgeable. Contact or catastrophe, messenger or threat, signal or snare. The public, denied clarity, erupted in chaos, streets filled with protests demanding disclosure. Some carried banners reading "Speak to them." Others waved signs crying "Don't answer." Churches overflowed, some praying for salvation, others warning of demonic deception. Gun stores reported record sales again. Conspiracy networks pulsed with rumors. Atlas had already landed drones on Mars. Atlas was rewriting satellite software. Atlas was watching us from inside our own communication systems. Every claim, no matter how wild, found an audience. And through it all, the signals continued. On October 31st, as Earth rotated into a better listening position, multiple deep space dishes recorded the clearest sequence yet. A binary pattern lasting 27 minutes, punctuated by rhythmic pulses at intervals that matched Earth's own Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic hum of our planet. To many, it was undeniable. Atlas wasn't just broadcasting, it was syncing with Earth itself. The debate crystallized into a single question: do we answer? SETI had dreamed of this scenario for decades. Protocols had been drafted, guidelines debated, strategies outlined in academic papers. But theory is one thing, reality another. Who speaks for Earth? Who decides the message? What language? What tone? What risk? To send nothing might be cowardice. To send something might be fatal. In the Oval Office, the president listened to advisors argue into the night. Military voices warned of manipulation, of bait. Scientists urged that silence could be interpreted as ignorance, even hostility. Political strategists worried about optics. If another nation answered first, would America lose the mantle of leadership in history's most important conversation? Silence was safer. Speech was bolder. Neither was without peril. As dawn broke on November 1st, the decision came. The president addressed the nation, his voice steady, his eyes betraying the weight of history. "We are not alone," he said. "Signals have been received, consistent with intelligent origin. This is not an attack. This is not a weapon. It is contact. And tonight, America will answer." The words electrified the world. Some cheered, some wept, some rioted. Across time zones, billions of people stopped what they were doing and stared at screens. In a bunker beneath Maryland, engineers transmitted a carefully crafted reply through the deep space network. A simple sequence. Prime numbers, the Fibonacci series, basic mathematical constants. A handshake, a hello. Then came the wait. Hours passed. The sun swallowed Atlas from view, perihelion blazing, its green coma shimmering unseen. Dishes listened, computers passed static, humanity held its breath. And then, just as the world began to despair, the reply came. A burst, sharp, coherent, undeniable. It echoed the Fibonacci series back, then extended it further, beyond where our message had ended. A continuation, a conversation, proof. The world erupted. Some fell to their knees, convinced salvation had arrived. Others cursed, certain doom had spoken. Scientists sobbed in control rooms. Children stayed up past midnight, whispering that aliens had said hello. The whisper of artificiality was no longer a whisper. It was a shout across the void, undeniable, real. But beneath the awe lay dread. If Atlas was speaking, then Atlas was listening. If Atlas was replying, then Atlas had intentions. Were they benign? Were they curious? Were they patient? No one knew, and yet the die was cast. Humanity had chosen to answer, to step into dialogue with a visitor older than nations, older than our species, born under a foreign star and now brushing past our Sunday. As Atlas curved around perihelion and began its long outbound arc, accelerating away into the darkness between stars, the signals continued, sporadic, rhythmic, deliberate. The green coma dimmed, the anti-tail dissolved, the heartbeat pulses softened. By December, Atlas would fade beyond naked eye detection, its memory captured in photographs, in recordings, in history books not yet written. But the conversation had begun. And now, the true decision loomed, not whether to speak, but how to live in the aftermath. Humanity was no longer alone, not in theory, not in dream, but in fact. The first words had been exchanged, the first response given, the door was open. What stepped through it would shape centuries to come. In the end, Atlas left us with no closure, only questions, only echoes. Contact or catastrophe, friend or foe, messenger or scout. Perhaps time would tell, perhaps it never would. But one truth was certain. In October 2025, beneath the green glow of a comet that refused to behave, humanity crossed a threshold it could never return from. We had looked into the sky and heard a voice, and by answering, we had declared ourselves heard.